So, hey Max, how's it going?
Hey, Sard. Really good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on in the morning. So, for those who don't know, the difference between us and Singapore, it's 9 p.m. here, it's 10 a.m. for you. We operate on different time zones, but uh, the things that we do are very similar. So, we want to talk a little bit about the family office work that you do, the involvement that you have on other fronts as well. But people in my group, people in my base of investors, they like to get to know other investors, and so that's the whole purpose of today.
Yeah, thanks, Sard. So I'll give a bit of color. So, my name's Maxwell. I'm based in Singapore, which is a bit of a family office hub right now. A lot of the big publications, like Bloomberg, are calling it the Switzerland of Asia, and there's a lot of good reasons as to why. I'll get into those later. What I do here is, I'm here to manage investments for my family along with my brother. And also, I run a community called Family Office Insider, which has about 100 family offices, investors, deal makers in there that is pretty even split. So it's about, 30-40% Asia Pacific, 30% Europe, 30% North America, of which side, you're included in that. And what we love to do, or what I love to do in the community, is help each other, including myself, of course, grow our portfolio companies. And I've got one main portfolio baby that I'm pregnant with right now, which is called Wandara, which is an industrial hemp company. So for right now, I'm the industrial hemp guy, lack of a better word, but that's a bit of background on me.
So, three different areas here, and we'll talk about every single one. How about we start with your background with the family and with the family office that you?
Yeah, so my profession was I worked for the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, so I managed $500 million companies for the bank. And then I hated that. And then I had my own startup, which was an online education business. Did that for about 5 years and then exited that to my business partners, just a management buyout, nothing sexy, nothing
Right.
that would make the newspapers. And then I wanted to come back to investments. So I teamed up with my brother, who's a developer in Australia, and he also does private credit. So private credit's a bit like our bread and butter. We wrote about $80 million dollars in about the last 18 months or so. And we decided to move out of, because the thing about, so everyone in the family office space, they get into it for a reason, right? Usually they're really deep in one industry and they want a bit of exposure, or they're a little bit tired or fatigued of that industry. So we're a perfect example. So
Yep.
we are very deep in the real estate industry in Australia. I'm Australian, I'm from Brisbane. And, development and private credit, where you lend to developers, are both in the same cycle. So when times are
Right.
good, times are good. But when times are slow, times are really slow. And right now, times are slow. So,
Right.
so we're venturing into private equity and venture capital, under a private family investment vehicle, which is, all of our activities based in Singapore.
It's interesting, and that's with your brother.
Yeah, it's with my brother. Yeah, my blood brother.
Now, now next to that, and actually even longer that I've known you for is the family office insider, which is fascinating to me. So yes, in that WhatsApp sort of the community that we have, and I find that this is the case. There are lots of little WhatsApp communities getting around where groups of investors are starting to talk to one another. But I say lots of little, and then there's yours, which is not so little.
Mm.
So, how did you get to where you are with the Family Office Insider? How did you meet everybody? And what do you find are the key priorities of family offices when they talk to one another?
Yeah, great question. So it started very organically, it was a very selfish reason as to why I started it. I just wanted to put a few of my guys that were doing similar things in a group so I could bounce
Right.
ideas and we could vet stuff together and DD stuff
Yeah.
together. and it's so much faster, right? You don't
which
have
I
to go
can
through. Yeah.
which I can say happens because every WhatsApp group that I'm in, it's like this person's pitching this deal and that deal, but with yours, it's like, guys, this is what I did. What do you think?
Yeah, yeah, and that's the value, because I guess the real core reason is because I hate doing DD. I just find it so painful, and I want to move fast, and I want to move with good people. So when you have good people, I want to keep them close to me. So this is like my version, keep them close to me. So I started the community about a year ago now, and no, 10 months ago. And we're about 100 strong all around the world. Everyone that I've either met in person or had, a few calls with. In Australia, we have this thing called the no dickhead policy. So everyone's passed the the no dickhead policy test, of course. And and they're all really good people. They're everyone that I would have a beer with or brunch with on the weekend. I would spend my weekend time with them. I've flown to meet you side and I really enjoyed that. I did that very deliberately, right?
Yeah.
So
What are some of the priorities that people have in the group, and how do they interact with one another?
yeah, so a very typical thing is if I want to know something or someone else wants to know something, yes, of course, there's people saying, hey, look, we've just invested in this deal. We're trying to close out the last 5, 10 million. Would anyone like to jump in?
Right.
That of course happens. But there's also where, so I'm really strong in real estate, private credit.
Right.
I'm not as strong in everything else. So whenever I want to do something new, I'll ask the group and say, hey, look, has anyone looked at green energy where you turn canola oil into diesel? Which is a
Right.
question that I asked. And three people in the group had done that exact thing and all gotten out for three separate reasons. So those three separate reasons, you would have never found them in DD, or you would have taken you weeks to find them, through Google and reading papers and things like that. But we got
Right.
those answers from the horse's mouth directly, which is great. Yeah, and this is what I wanted to share. So what I wanted to share is that the group is evolving. It was just a group where people text each other and maybe meet up for some informal drinks. But now we're starting to do events. We more or less partnered with USAID and Nvestiv to bring some people to some of your events. And we've partnered with MA Financial, which is an Australian public listed company, the Australian arm of Mo Ellis and Company. We've partnered with the Singapore Stock Exchange twice now,
Yeah.
and we've also partnered with LIGO Partners from Miami to get people in a room. And we're averaging right now about maybe 6 to 8 events a year, which is really great because everyone that goes to those events, they are meeting people they would have never met before,
Yeah.
right? And yeah.
That's very important actually, because you pointed out the piece about the in-person relationships. Everyone says family offices like relationships, relationships. Well, why is that? It's not because people just like to be friends with other people. It's precisely what you mentioned, right? Which is the resources that come with it. So tell me a little bit about this resources aspect, right? It's a think tank. That's the way that I like to call it. That's the way that I like to think about it. If I have an idea, I'll pitch it to the group, or a group and say, hey, what do you guys think? But then you get all these diverse mindsets within the group, right? Some people made their money in real estate, some people made their money in private equity, and those people are not the same in how they think, right? So, what kind of dynamics do you see in the group? I mean, I know the answer to that question, but I'd love for you to comment on it. And
Mhm.
then how does that help people overall, and how does it help you in your decision making along the way?
Yeah, I think, well, what before COVID, people would generally only invest if they, got to fly to you, shake your hand, meet you in the eye,
Yeah.
maybe have a meal with you and really look at you in the eyes as they shake your hand type of thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
COVID's helped us to evolve out of that pretty, a lot faster than everyone was probably ready to, where people these days, yeah, they probably would invest a bit more money, much more than before COVID, from an email or from a message or from whatever. So the way I see our community is that it's a step in between. It's a step in between the face-to-face meeting and in between the total cold, digitize, send an email, send me a deck, send me the docs to subscribe. So it helps to connect with real people. And what I mean by real people is A, you're not talking to anyone's assistant in that group.
Yeah. Yeah.
And B, everyone in that group is um, a decision maker or an extension of a or a co-decision maker because I want to have people in there that can do things fast because I like
Right.
to do things fast and you get straight to the point and you get to a quick yes, quick no, and everyone gets on with their lives, whether that's in terms of information, whether that's in terms of investment, whether that's in terms of another introduction, or it's in terms of, hey, would you like to come to this event? No one needs to ask for permission for anything. It's everyone can speak for themselves.
So what's the vision? You mentioned you're doing events now, but like, where do you see all of this evolving into ultimately?
Yeah, so let me give you, the transparent, selfish vision, and I'll give you the unselfish vision. So the selfish vision is that it allows me to get and everyone in the group as well first look at what everyone thinks is really, really great.
Yeah.
So um in terms of, hey, look, that there's a group in the group that is looking at a few different roll-ups in a few different industries, and roll-ups are always very exciting. When someone's pinpointed that one arbitrage in that one
Yeah.
country within that one industry, then they're looking to list it. That's almost always, very lucrative as long as it's done well. So first looks at things like that, and then there's also exclusive things where someone might only want 5 people on their cap table and they want to see who adds the most value. And that is something that I want to get a first look at. I'm sure you do as well, Si. Whether or not we participate is another thing, but you get to learn from each other, and you get to learn from someone that has 40 years experience in doing this thing.
Right.
Where would you find that? You can't find that in a
Right.
book, right? You just
Yeah.
can't. And then you get to put money alongside them. Like, how great is that? So that's a selfish reason I'm sure everyone is in the group. The big grand vision, I haven't really thought about this, but if I had to put something onto it, it would be, yeah, it would then evolve into a brand where we might be something a little bit like the Milken Conference, right? Really, really high quality um, congregation of great people doing great things. Maybe there might be a conference focused on impact in ESG. Maybe there
Yeah.
might be a conference focused on, geopolitical, something's a bit more macro and a bit more, political because, yeah, everyone in the
Right.
group's very, very influential, right? Just by the nature of how much money they manage and what they do and that type of thing.
So ESG and impact is something that I've heard of quite often from you. Um, it seems to be an area that you focus on. Now, Wandara is a perfect example of that. Do you want to touch a little bit on Wandara and why the impact and the ESG is so important?
Yeah, so Wandara is my business partners and I industrial hemp farm in North Queensland in Australia. So
Yeah.
Wandara is an Aboriginal word. It means good land or for the land that's good. And um, we, you know, well, there's a few reasons why I really love this business. The first reason is that to be able to get into a country's, top three export, which is agriculture, at the seed level is unheard of, right? Because usually industries this old have been totally um, fully matured, and it's very, very hard to get in.
Yeah.
Unless you're born really like mining and
Yeah.
gas and things like that,
Yeah.
right? So that's really exciting from a commercialization perspective. The next perspective is that we're solving a huge problem, right? So industrial hemp, which is separate to cannabis, probably good I distinguish this. So cannabis has THC, which is a psychedelic. Industrial hemp has less than 1% THC. So it's essentially like a fast growing bamboo tree. And what it solves a lot of problems. There's about 25,000 products, green, sustainable, total sustainable products that can be made from hemp. industrial hemp, and the vast majority of those compete with crude oil. So what I like to say tongue in cheek to people is that in Northern Australia, in Queensland, you could drive 17 hours in one direction and still not reach the border. Like that's how big this block of land we have that all the farming happens in.
Oh, wow.
And what I like to tell people tongue in cheek is that when we commercialize and monetize and get up to scale in our farm, we can become like the Saudi Arabia of the sustainable green products world.
Right.
Um, and ESG and impact is something that I personally enjoy because, yeah, you can make money doing anything, but why not make money and get a good return and something that actually, doesn't cost the planet anything, which is
So
which is good.
ESG and impact always is an interesting topic to me because there are those who look at the impact first and then think of how do I make money? And then there are those who say, you know what, I'm going to make money. And then what's the double bottom line here, right? What camp do you
Yeah.
fall under?
Yeah. So this is how I distinguish it. Um, ESG is looking backwards. It's like making money. Now, how can I make my money a bit more innocently? Right? It's
Right,
it's it's looking in the rearview mirror.
right,
Impact is how can I solve uh, a problem with green solutions,
right.
right? Because we're growing a farm from grassroots, we're definitely in that solution, right? How can I solve a problem in green solutions instead of I'm already farming, I'm already, just uh I don't know what the word is. I'm already mining coal. How do I make that less impactful on the planet? So that's that in my mind, that's ESG. It's looking backwards, but then impact is looking forwards.
And so a couple of things. So what you mentioned to me about in Wandaro when we first started speaking about Wandaro, I thought was fascinating because you highlighted the use cases of hemp. And then you also mentioned that competitively, because take Canada, Canada has a huge industry in hemp. You guys have a seasonal advantage there as well, right? So with all of these things in place, the one thing I forgot about what you mentioned is, are you as a company growing the hemp yourself, or is it that you're sourcing from local farmers and etc. that are already present?
Yeah, good question. So, you never want to jump into any investment without an advantage, right? So we have two huge advantages by farming hemp in Australia. So the biggest producer of hemp right now is China, France, Canada, and USA, but all those countries, as you know, have winter. So there's only really about one one crop they can farm a year. Hemp grows in about up to 120 days, so you can farm it technically up to 3 times a year. Because where we farm it in North Queensland is very close to the equator, there's not really any winter. Well, not from a
Right,
Canadian standpoint anyway. So we can farm at least twice a year. So instantly, our farmers and our company has 200% efficiency. We can make
right,
many mistakes.
right.
Farming mistakes happen and bad crops happen and that sort of thing. So we can just run twice as fast, right? We can get up to speed twice as fast. And then the second advantage is that where we're farming, there's about 68,000 hectares of of sugarcane being farmed. Now, sugarcane is a very, very taxing crop on the soil.
Yep.
And around about every 3 years, the government has said that the farmers have to rotate the crop. And before we came along, hemp is one of the approved rotational crops. Before we came along, the farmers were farming things like chickpeas and mung beans, and because there's no industry for them in this part of Australia, the farmers would just pull them out and throw them away and then burn them for biomass. So it would be a cost with no return. So we've come along and said, hey, look, how would you like to actually monetize your off season where, we'll pay you a little bit of rent, for example, in
Right.
layman's terms, and um, and you'll still regenerate the soil and you'll be helping to build a new profitable industry for the local economy. So with those two advantages, we essentially have uh, probably the most accurate word is we've been provisioned
Right.
free land
Mhm.
to farm in this part of the world, and farm it twice a year instead of just once a year.
So it really is a blue ocean sort of for you in this category.
Yeah, it's a blue ocean. Yes, it's a blue ocean for us to monetize, but it's also a blue ocean, for the world because the problem with hemp is that it can be used in so many different products. There's not enough production for all those products to be sourced.
Right.
That just isn't. Yeah.
We went to visit a family office friend of ours, and he was showing us this hotel that he built, and he was explaining that the concrete that he used was all hemp.
Oh, really? Where was it?
Yeah, Montreal.
Oh,
So
nice. Beautiful.
so beautiful hotel, brand new. We refurbished and etc. And we just looked at it, and he was pointing out that the parts of the hotel where the metal beams were, and then he pointed out the parts of the hotel that was concrete, that was hemp concrete, and he said that that was structurally so much more sound than any of the other options that he had, and cheaper
Oh,
too.
that's amazing. We're not up to
Yeah,
there yet in Australia, so that's where the opportunity is for us. What's the name of
yeah.
that hotel?
The Hyatt in Old Montreal.
The Hyatt, like the actual Hyatt.
Yes,
Oh, wow. Nice. I'm
in
gonna use that. Put that in our deck.
in Old Montreal. Yeah. So
Yeah.
um, it was actually developed by one of the groups that we know in Montreal. So yeah, the Hyatt Regency Hotel, not the Regency, it's the Hyatt Hotel in Old Montreal. The other use case actually is the inner linings of vehicles. That's another use case that's very popular in Canada and US. So we've got one
Mm,
portfolio company. What they do is they're building, how do I best describe it? It's the felt liner that comes inside most vehicles, right? So the nicer
mm,
cars will use things like Alcantara and etc. But
mm,
the family vehicles or the vehicles that are more economy style, they'll use some type of fabric. But nowadays, a lot of manufacturers are starting to use hemp.
mm. Yeah,
So
that there's so many big things happening, and it's right, we're right at the really early part of the hockey stick.
yeah,
So there's a hemp plastic manufacturer that we know in Canada, and they have the opportunity to fulfill OEMs for door panels for Honda and Tesla because they want to be totally sustainable.
yeah,
And then there's also, so a lot of people don't know this. So hemp was prohibitioned alongside marijuana, even though it doesn't do the same thing as marijuana, in the early 1910s. And um, before that, 90% of the world's paper was made from hemp because it's a faster,
really,
more sustainable. Yeah, you don't have to, because you don't have to cut down a tree. And
all
this
right,
tree grows back in 120 days, so it's much more efficient. You don't have to
right.
deforest a forest to make paper, right? And um, all of the ropes in the British Navy was made from hemp because hemp is very fire resistant. So, those ropes that you see in movies like Pirate of the Caribbean, those would be made from hemp, and the sails would be made from hemp. And the uniforms as well was made from hemp. So hemp is a very, very age-old fabric that's, you know, gone throughout history. We've just sort of forgotten how to use it.
So do you think that those industries, now that these hemp, for example, is descheduled or things like that, do you think that those industries will start to adopt hemp again?
Yeah, so it's very, very, very early days. I don't have a purchase order contract in hand, but we are speaking to people who are interested in buying uh in the vicinity of about 50,000 tons of hemp fiber to make fabric,
Oh,
to mill it into fabric. Yeah, so that's about $100 million of hemp. It's not a small number.
right, right.
And also, uh, Adidas released a hemp shoe last year,
I saw
right?
that.
Adidas,
Yes.
yeah, and they also have hemp bags that they're already making, right? And there's hemp bags and clothes made out of Portugal right now. So all that type of stuff. And you might be thinking, well, what's the point, right? We have cotton. I'm happy with my shirt that I'm wearing right now. Why would I want to change? But what a lot of people don't know is that cotton uses 5 times the amount of water and soil to make to be made into a fabric compared to hemp. So it's a very, very costly thing. It's not ideal for the environment. Um, do I think it'll ever completely replace it? Probably not, because cotton's softer. Hemp is a bit more
Yeah.
like linen. It's
Yes.
a more of a competitor to linen. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Hemp is a very fascinating sort of topic for me because it is so closely related to the cannabis sector, in mindset only. Um, but in theory, and sorry, but in practice, it has nothing to do with that, right? So it's always gotten a bad rap, and as you said, people are now starting to rediscover it. Let's switch gears a little bit to sort of macro. Now, you're Australian. You spend a lot of time in Singapore, but you live in Singapore now, right?
Yeah, yeah. I live in Singapore. Yeah. I'm a
So
resident.
tell me,
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about Singapore. What that's like as a hub, what it's like as a place to live. Um, we have a lot of friends that are North American friends who talk about their Singapore counterparts. They're looking to set up offices in Singapore. Why is it becoming such a hub?
Yeah, I've almost become like the Singapore guy for international people to
It's
ask for
funny
help.
you it's funny you say that. The people that met you at the last event that we did, right? They refer to you as the Singapore guy.
Singapore guy. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's not a bad title to have. So, um, well, let me start in the beginning, right? Why Singapore? Why is everyone talking about Singapore? So, um, what they've done really well is they've identified a huge need, right? And the need is a safe place for people to put capital that is reliable, that has a great legal system, a recognized legal system, right? So they feel safe and a strict, uh, a highly regulated currency, right? Where there's obvious, advantages, incentives, whether they're tax incentives or visa incentives or whatever else. So Switzerland's a really good example. So Switzerland does all that. I don't know Switzerland super well, but from what I understand, Switzerland does all that, and it's been doing that for a very long time. But there can't only be just one Switzerland, right? And Switzerland's in a very, very unique part of the world. It's in Europe. What about Asia? What about the US? What about all these other places, right? So the US, North Americans usually would gravitate towards like the islands, right? British Virgin Islands, Cayman Islands, and that sort of thing. But there was no country that was servicing Asia Pacific. And Asia Pacific, the timing of Asia Pacific's rise in the family office space is
Ooh,
almost perfect because what a lot of people don't remember is that a lot of these countries were developing,
yes.
very much still developing only 40 years ago, right? So we're still in the first generation of wealth, right? So a lot of the family offices here, I speak to them and I meet them, and it's a very, very common story. So dad or granddad made the money or made the business. He's still
Yes.
alive. And he's still
Mhm.
controlling, he's still generally controlling the business, hasn't learned to let go yet, but that's a different story.
That never
And
happens.
yeah, yeah, and especially in Southeast Asian culture as well. So granddad started the business in 1960, 1970, 1980. It started to do really, really well. Dad is doing it now. And these businesses are usually unsophisticated industrial businesses. They're not Silicon Valley tech businesses. They are shipping and logistics. They
Yes.
are oil refinery storage. They are
The
driving trucks, right? They are
Yeah.
building hotels. They're construction companies because that's all this place needed because this place, this Asia Pacific region needed a lot of development in that
Yes.
period, and you make money, you make money building tires, building wrenches, winches for cars and things like that. So all these businesses are very, very industrial and bricks and mortar. Now, what's happened is that the generation has gotten from, one to two to three, and one, two, and three are all still alive. Often it's just from one to two. And now the wealth has gotten so big and needs a bit of management because it's just sitting in a bank account doing nothing, right?
Which happens a lot in
Literally,
Asia.
yeah, which happens a lot in Asia, right? And it's not just doing nothing. Usually, some of the banks here might charge 2, 3, 4% just for the pleasure of holding your funds. So, so um, so Singapore's positioned themselves really well to solve a big problem. It wasn't like they had to go out and market. They just said, hey, look, we're going to identify this problem and we're going to solve it. We're going to give you a relatively safe place to live with low to no crime, with a place that's very clean. Singapore's probably one
Yeah,
of the cleanest places in the world. It used to be illegal I think it still is illegal to spit chewing gum on the street. You can receive a fine or, have to deal with the police for doing that.
yeah,
And, the banking system is very robust
yeah.
and very, very highly, 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 highly regulated. The
Mhm.
KYC in Singapore, to open up a bank account could last 6 months.
Right.
Right? So there's no shortcuts here, all for the right reasons.
Yes.
So that cocktail of benefits all put together has created a advantageous, diversified safe haven for large portions of wealth to park at least some of their money, right? So that is how I believe the industry has evolved from
Yes.
talking to people, anecdotally being boots on the ground, so to speak. And because they've gotten such a head start, they'll probably never be overtaken,
Right.
right? And if you want to talk about numbers, I don't know the exact numbers, but they're in the thousands. Like 2,000 family offices have registered a setup here in the last, call it 5 years. I
Mhm.
don't Those aren't the exact numbers, but it's in that ballpark. Yeah.
So, from what I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of the money in Singapore, a lot of the family offices are money that's come out of China. They don't want to be in that environment that's in China, so they try to get that money out and settle in Singapore. That's traditionally been the case. I don't know if that's still the case, but there are other countries in Asia that are in conjunction coming out of their developing sort of title, right? India being one of them. Now, India is interesting because the family offices we know from India, it's split half half. Actually, split in thirds, in my opinion. One third says I will stay in India because this is where I built my wealth and this is the country that I want to contribute towards. Then there's another group that I think might well. Then there's the group that goes to the Middle East, right? The moment they can get their money out of India, they go straight to the Middle East, Dubai, Kuwait, Abu Dhabi, and etc.
Dubai is actually another competitor to Singapore. I shouldn't use the word competitor, but like playing the same game as Singapore. Yeah.
For sure. So that's happening. Do you find that there's at least a significant amount of South Asian capital going towards Singapore?
I don't know any of these numbers. It's totally anecdotal, but when I speak to people, the answer is yes. And there's so much people don't realize how much money there is, and businesses and AUM in this part of the world. Like they really don't. One example is Indonesia, right? So Indonesia,
Yeah,
the very, very interesting country. It's a country made up of 17,000 islands.
right.
17,000 islands, about 280 million people, fifth largest economy in the world, right?
I didn't
And,
know
and
that.
yeah, and it's not on anyone's radar. It has the second
Right,
largest rainforest in the world, which is totally
right.
protected, so after the Amazon,
Yeah.
and rich in coal,
Uh-huh.
gold, nickel, iron
Yeah,
ore, like rich in all
yeah,
these things. And it's and it's um and has direct access to water. So it could
yeah.
be a trade port hub in the world. And
Mhm.
but as an example, a lot of the really wealthy people there, they'll put, yeah, at least some of their portion of
Yeah.
income or AUM or whatever in Singapore, at least just in a Singaporean bank account. right? So well, a lot of this is, you know, if you have $500 million, you don't put it
Mhm.
all in the bank
Right.
because of what might happen, for example, to the banks in the US, right?
Right.
Over the last 20 years. You want to put it in five banks. So, you pick a Singaporean bank, you might pick a Swiss bank, you might pick a Dubai bank, and at least then you've got, geopolitical diversification. So
Yes.
that's one of the big problems that's this country solves.
It's very interesting. So in my experience, maybe, oh, okay, this is not my personal experience, this is my family's experience. What we found is that Singapore traditionally has had a different mindset than it may have now. So the perfect example is Dubai and the Middle East, right? The entire infrastructure there is managed by sovereign capital. Right. There is no government, there's no taxes, any of those things. Therefore, the sovereign wealth is what has to go and build the infrastructure of those nations. And as you can see, some of the fastest growing infrastructure in the world. So, what that means is that the money and the capital that is in the MENA region tends to be invested back into the MENA region, and they're not often interested in putting their money outside. Now, Singapore,
Right.
in the past, it's been similar. Well, different. Sorry, in the past, it's been different. What they've done is they've sort of collected the money there as a base of operations, and then traditionally invested to Australia, to North America, to Europe. Do you
Mhm.
find that that's still the case, or are there surrounding investment opportunities and vehicles that more money is now flocking to? Again, anecdotally.
Yeah, yeah. So what I would say is this, because the family office uh industry is so nascent here, like
Yeah,
first gen is still alive, right?
yeah,
Uh in Europe, they're up, almost most of them are beyond like 10th generation, right?
yeah,
So very, very
yeah.
sophisticated, otherwise they wouldn't still be here, right?
Right,
Very, very intelligent governance and everything. Otherwise, they wouldn't still be here. In North America, they're like sixth, seventh generation. Even Australia is, much higher than Asia Pacific. So there's in speaking to people, because I speak to a lot of the next gens because they're similar
right,
age to me, and a lot of the single family offices don't really have the structures and governance and mandates set up. They're
right.
still just sort of managing part of the family business for mum or dad.
Mhm. Yeah,
So the idea that there's all these people here that have a mandate, oh, I need to allocate 20% to private credit, is actually a huge assumption. Really, if you want to raise money here, you need to have built real relationships with a lot of these people, because it's still very relationship based. It's not transactional at all. Like they actually don't care about return. They care about safety of money. They
right.
care about people that trust. A lot of people here would rather lose money investing with a friend than have a high promise of making money with a slick venture capital person that used to work for McKinsey,
Mhm.
because it's ultra relationship based,
Yeah,
not as
that
transactional as
that's
North America.
something. We're definitely very transactional here. It's like, what's your historical record? That's probably
Yeah.
the most important thing we look at. It's funny you say that. This is a close friend of mine. He's an Indian gentleman, but he's got his own family office, and he said this to me. He said exactly as you put it. We don't have a mandate of X% of our portfolio has to be allocated to this, and if it's not right, then we have to bring it back to equilibrium. Like, there's none of that. It's simply, if it's me who is the next generation. My father still controls it. My mother still is around telling him exactly what to do. And if you want money, then you're going to have to come and convince me, and then I have to go to bat for you to my father. And
Yeah.
and that's type of the mindset that you have. And so, um,
That that happens like 90% of the time. And when I say that, I'm talking about a typical single family office maybe worth, 30, 50, 100, 150 mil. When you get above 250 to 500 plus, uh, the sophistication does increase.
Yes.
It increases because it's just too hard. Like they've gotten to the point where they have to hire people, and the hire people
Yes.
need direction and structure, and usually they hire CEO and they handle all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, this is all really fascinating. I feel like we need to at some point just revisit this and just have another conversation because Singapore, Dubai and the Middle East, they evolved so quickly that their scene kept changing month to month, year to year, right? What was true today is not true tomorrow, and I feel that Singapore will has been and it will go through the same sort of evolution and progression. Um, is there anything that you would like to leave us with as we wrap up? As to sort of the state of Singapore today and what business is going to look like going forward,
Mm.
especially around those who want to raise capital, right? I mean, the whole audience that I have is, I would say, 40% allocators and 60% people that are looking to access allocators. So, how
Yeah,
do how do people behave with
yeah,
with Singapore family offices, and how is that different from North American family offices?
yeah. So the first thing I would say is really, really just be careful of your assumptions. So one thing well, there's a few things. So people, and just to share, I get messages, people messaging me to ask me to help them raise capital in Singapore because I'm like the Singapore guy, 3 times a week, right?
All right,
And I used to go to these raises and I would watch other people just to sort of see what happens twice a
right,
week. There's literally a VC firm from North America pitching here, buying lunch, buying dinner twice a week. Like
right,
you know, I don't need to I don't need to pay for my own food if I really wanted to just go to all of these events.
right.
So um I pretty much watch all of them fail because they don't understand the culture. They don't understand that if the only real group that you could really pitch to here totally cold is the institutional group. But then they're going to ask you for things like track record, and there's groups here that pitch and present, and they've got 15 years audited financials,
Right.
right? So how can you compete against that if you don't have that? And um, another thing to note is, what was I going to say? Uh,
Touch on
I
the
lost.
relationship aspect a little bit more because so what you said is not to do, right? It is not to treat it that way. I'll give you an example. A North American VC is going to go to Singapore. He's going to arrange a lunch. He's going to have 50 people maybe or 20 people at the lunch.
Yeah,
He'll give a short presentation, and then based on those that are interested or show some level of interest, they'll follow up with the ones that seem to be low hanging fruit. That's the way that we do it here in North America. But
yeah,
you're not
yeah.
going to get an accurate representation of
Yeah, okay.
who's
So yeah,
interested.
exactly. So here's what I was going to say. Um, in North America, it would be safe to assume that if someone responds to you and say, "Hey, look, I'll have lunch," after they see what you do, they're interested, right? Is that a safe
Yes,
assumption? Right? Because no one goes
100%.
to a lunch. No one goes to a lunch if they won't bother responding to you, especially if they're from
Yes.
like the East Coast, right? They're from New
Yeah.
York. They won't respond to you unless they're interested. Now, in Asian culture, it's rude to not uh say yes when
Accept an
someone wants to,
invitation.
right? To accept an invitation. It's seen as very, very rude. So,
Yes.
and I watch fund managers do this all the time. They'll go out and they'll buy the same person like 6 lunches,
Right.
but they were never interested. But they take the fact that they keep saying yes as they're interested, but it doesn't mean that in Asia. It just means that they're being polite. Like because and yes, that's a huge waste of time because I'm
Yes.
from Australia. So yeah, it's a huge waste of time. But that is the cultural difference, and people assume, oh yeah, and I hear it all the time. Oh man, how was your trip? I was good. Had like 20 meetings, really strong coffees and stuff. They're looking at our deck. And then I asked them later, how'd it go? Oh, didn't raise anything. Yeah, because you didn't, you're making a huge assumption that saying yes to a meeting means that they're interested when
Right.
it's not. You're being polite. Yeah.
So then what's the instruction on what to do as opposed to what not to do?
Yeah, without being rude and obnoxious, you got to get to the point. get to the pointy end. You can't say, "Hey, look, I want to buy you lunch. Just want to talk. Just want to like you got to say, is this something you'd be interested in?" They'll almost always say no. They'll say,
Right.
"No, we don't do that. No, we don't do that. No, we don't like that. No, we tried that. We lost money. We don't like it." And you've got to actually ask them that type of pointy question um, uh, because they don't have their mandates on their websites like North Americans.
Yes.
So, and that's a huge time waste. So all those people that message me say, "Hey, look, want to raise in Singapore, can you help me?" Just say, just don't waste your time. Like stay in North America. Because yes, even though there's a lot of money here, it doesn't mean that the money, see, what you need to also understand is that the money that's come here, a lot of it has come, I don't know the exact number, but a lot of it has come here defensively,
Yes.
right? They've come here to sit in a bank account so that they don't have, um, you know, cross-border, they come here to find a safer bank account. They
Oh
basically
yeah, for
come here
sure.
as a term deposit. They didn't come here to be hunted by VCs. Right? So, but
Mhm.
if five VCs a week wants to buy them lunch, they'll take the lunch.
Because
So
not because they can't afford a meal, but it's because it's rude not to.
exactly. So don't take a yes as interest. Take, hey, look, can I see your deck? We actually allocate to private credit, and you look like a good candidate. Take something as direct as that as interest.
That's probably the most insightful thing I've heard
Yeah.
in a little while.
No one wants to hear
Because
it. I tell
yeah.
people all the time, and they say, "No, we've already booked our tickets for coming to Singapore." And I said, "Okay, you're better off just like, sending out some hotel vouchers and not coming and seeing if you get a response. Like, there's just no point in coming unless you
So
you have a guide." Yeah.
yes. So that was my next question, and in wrapping up is okay. Well, you're the Singapore guy, right? So what are some ways to connect with people like yourselves who have these warm relationships, who maybe understand what these groups, what their mandates are, what their interests are, right? What's the best way to connect with people like you? And I'm not saying what's the address to reach you at. I'm saying, what kind of things do you want to see? What kind of stress tests do you have in deciding that you want to work with somebody or you don't want to work with somebody?
Yeah, good question. Really good question. So, well, the first one's a no dickhead test. So, if
We don't have one of these in North America. You know this, right?
yeah. If yeah, it's very transactional. People don't care, but
Yeah.
I don't have time for that. So if you want to chat with me, our website is called familyofficeinsider.co. You can reach me
I'll
there.
I'll put the
If
put the link in the.
Yeah, if there's someone else, and I don't raise capital. Like this is not what I do. I'm just saying, if you want some help, and especially if you like looking at other new deals as well, then yeah, love to chat. But I don't raise capital. I just have a lot of opinions on it because I see a lot of it fail all the time. And you know, there's a few guys like me in Singapore that have strengths in other areas that I don't have. So, if I can't help you, I'll point you towards who I think can help you. But what I will say is that if you're a first or second time VC fund, if you're a VC fund without at least 3 years of audited financials, um, and you you have an anchor for your next fund, and you also have a GP commitment. That's very important as well. So the first thing that a lot of people will ask you is, what's your GP commitment? And if
Like,
it's
what's
less
your
than
skin in
two,
the game?
yeah, if it's less than 2%, then you're wasting your time. You're absolutely wasting your time. Like I know a lot of families who won't even look at a deal unless the skin in the game is at least 10%.
Oh,
So
10%. Interesting. Okay.
10%,
Yeah. So the
yeah,
average here is about 4%.
yeah, it's got to be at least 10% for, you're not even um you you won't even get an email back unless it's 5% in a lot of cases, but you'll tick a lot of boxes when it's 5%, and
So
yeah.
Well, I was just
So
gonna say
in
in summary, don't be a dickhead. That's number one, and be
yeah,
direct.
yeah, don't like and the culture is in terms of, putting money into something, the culture is don't don't do with my money what you wouldn't do with your own. That's like the deep philosophical culture in this part of the world. And why should I give you my money to do what you wouldn't do with your own?
I think at some point that was also the culture here, but somewhere along the way, people just forgot that.
Yeah, well, I think the allure and the seduction of people getting rich so quick, it just
Yeah,
people started taking shortcuts, right? Like, okay,
yeah.
that's fine, that's fine, that's fine. So, yeah, and if you can understand those things, you've got a chance. You got a chance to build a real relationship with someone you could do real business with, who will respect you. But if not, then you're wasting your time. You're absolutely wasting your time. You're much better off using your 20K budget, giving it to Saad, and letting him help you. And I mean
Oh,
that, not just because Saad's here.
Sad stopped helping people now. We don't do that anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, even I've gotten tired of all of this, man. I've just said, look, I'm
Yeah,
gonna build the tech. I'm gonna keep a short sort of ecosystem around me of the people that I like and like to do business with, and
yeah,
I'm happy. I'm happy in that way. I don't want to go chasing rainbows at this point. No, I appreciate it, man. I look, some of what you told me today is new to me actually, and I'm sure that a
yeah,
lot of what you said today is new to a lot of people. So that's the whole purpose of why we do it. More so than anything, this is not for public distribution. This is more for uh, amongst our family office friends to be able to view it when they want to and etc. So uh,
yeah, perfect.
I think it's very very useful. And look, there is a level of interest now from North American families. I'm not talking about the fund managers, from families who want to make friends with other families in other jurisdictions.
Yeah.
And
See,
and
those people, please reach out to me because there's a lot of people, including myself, who would like to make relationships the other way, right? And they just want to talk to people that are actually, see, the bottom line is people want to talk to people that are actually putting money down,
yes,
their own money,
yes.
right? Not someone else's money.
Then
That's
you
the bottom
got
line.
then you don't need to worry about anybody's motivations or interests. Then you
Yeah,
can just say, okay,
motivation,
they put their
conflicts. Yeah, just, how much are you in this? Because I don't want to police you. I don't want to police you. I don't want to sit on the board. I don't, I don't want to check things. I don't want to have to hire someone to police you. Well,
yeah.
what's the point of, yeah. I
Awesome.
don't want to have to
So
ring you up.
I'll so when this gets released, I'll put some of the links and etc. that you talked about so far, the Family Office Insider. Anything else that you want to talk about or plug before we end off?
No, just yeah, if you're genuinely looking to do something good, some good business, put some money down and you're looking for a Singapore guy, which might not be me. I could probably help.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you, Max. Look, this is, I think, very insightful for me, and we will probably get a lot of interest for those who are actually seeing this because, as I said,
Perfect.
there's a lot of people asking about Singapore, and I always say, like, yeah, I know a guy, I'll introduce you, but I never get around to doing it. So I hope that this kind of clarifies a few things for a few people.
Yeah, perfect. Nice. Awesome. Thanks, Art. Appreciate it.